Well, speaking of budgets, we've had two budgets in the last 2 weeks. One, of course, federal budget this week, and then last week the Victorian budget, where that state's going to miss out on more than $11 billion in the carve-up of federal funding based on its share of the national population. The federal government has also knocked back a request from Victoria, as they should, to add to the $2.2 billion it's already committed to what's fast becoming a white elephant, the Suburban Rail Loop. God help us if that $2 billion, which the federal government has committed, is wasted on this tunnel project. For more, I'm joined by Shadow Sports and Tourism Minister and Minister for Youth, the member for Nepean, Sam Groth. Sam, great to have you back on Friday again. Suburban Rail Loop, it's facing billion-dollar blowouts. The Commonwealth says, well, you've got to prove the case of this thing or we won't tip any more money into it. Surely we're not going to see another Commonwealth Games disaster with this thing, are we?
Well, Steve, great to be back with you on a Friday once again. Well, I hope that's not the case, but this Allan Labor government seems to be forging right ahead with this project here in Victoria. But you do have two treasurers completely at odds with each other. You've got Tim Pallas down here in Victoria saying they've got a business case, it stacks up. And you've got Jim Chalmers up there as part of the Albanese federal government issuing no funds for the continuation of the Suburban Rail Loop. And the government has this figure down here between $30 and $34 billion. And I've been listening to the Minister for the Suburban Rail Loop in Danny Pearson at PAYEC today down here in Victoria. And the government themselves, throughout their major projects, they've acknowledged there's been at least a 22% increase in the cost of these major projects here in Victoria. But since 2021, the government hasn't made a single adjustment to the figures for their Suburban Rail Loop. So on one hand, they're saying, yes, projects are blowing out and the cost of doing things is going up and up. On the other hand, they're saying, well, that's for everything except the Suburban Rail Loop. And we know this government has no idea. Labor can't manage money here in Victoria. We've seen major projects across the board blow out by more than $40 billion. We've seen major blowouts on other huge tunnel projects. You've got to remember Suburban Rail Loop is a tunnel project. We've seen the Metro Tunnel blow out. We've seen huge blowouts now on North East Link. This government can't be trusted with their costings on major projects.
As a Victorian, as an Australian, I'm sure you'd agree with me on this. When you have projects of this size at that cost that are, if you're to believe the rhetoric around them, designed to let Melbourne cope with massive increase in population, shouldn't these things be federal projects managed by the states, but with the federal government putting people around it to make sure it works properly?
Well, I think we've got to make sure these projects, no matter what they are across the board, stack up. And, in a lot of these projects, in most of these projects, there'll be a contribution from a range of sources. But when you've got two Labor governments, one here in Victoria and one federally, at odds with each other over how a project stacks up, and you've got Infrastructure Australia saying they don't have all the details. I mean, if the federal treasurer can't trust the figures of the state government here in Victoria, how can Victorians trust them?
Absolutely, and we haven't even mentioned Airport Rail Link. I mean, if there's ever a national project that should be supported and built, it should be that a city that's going to end up with a population of somewhere between 6 and 10 million, you can at least get a train to the airport.
Well, Airport Rail Link has to be a project that should be top of mind. But the other thing that you also have to remember about the Suburban Rail Loop, and this was highlighted by the Shadow Minister for Public Transport, Matthew Guy, last week in Parliament, the Suburban Rail Loop, the trains, the gauge, they don't link up with the rest of Melbourne's metro train network. They're on a different gauge. They're on a different power system. So these trains that are supposed to go originally from Cheltenham to Box Hill all the way around to the airport and connect back into the metro train lines actually will never, ever be able to do that because they sit on a different gauge and with that different power supply. So it's been an absolute fantasy from this government. They've been selling something to Victorians that is actually never going to exist.
What a clown show. I pick up my Herald Sun today and talking about major projects, I read that entry-level labourers, traffic controllers on Victoria's Big Build, the people who hold those stop-go signs, are now in some cases earning more than $200,000 a year. Now, I heard the CFMMEU boss, John Setka, today defend that, say, well, to get $200,000, you have to work 6 days and you've got to be working 56 hours a week. But $200,000 to hold a sign fine. I mean, this story, though, is more, is it not, Sam, about standover tactics from a union that in the past has been very militant, lording it over the government of which it funds during election campaigns.
These projects need to be monitored more closely, and also the actions that are happening on these projects. Ongoing misconduct is only leading to ongoing cost blowouts. They're leading to the projects, going through the roof, cost escalations, and means money is not spent elsewhere. But can I just say, Steve, we've committed on our side, the Liberals, along with our coalition partners, we've committed to bringing in Construction Enforcement Victoria, so a construction watchdog that actually keeps an eye on these projects, how they're being managed, how people are being paid, the invoices that are being put in, and make sure that our projects are being managed in the right way possible. Yes, we need to continue building things. There is no doubt about that. But the amount of money that is being wasted through, the story today, possible rorts on these sites by ongoing poor misconduct on big build sites. I mean, this is one of the reasons, if not the major reason, why so many of these costs on these projects is blowing absolutely out. Victorians deserve better than this.
Yeah, I was talking to a bloke who owns a plumbing business today. He employs 250 plumbers. He said, look, if I could, I'd pack up and go to Queensland. The amount of pressure that gets put on me every day of the week by a unionised workforce, it just makes it almost impossible for me to make a profit.
I think the other thing at the moment to remember is as well, and I think this is part of the public sentiment that's not going down so well. No one's begrudging people doing a hard day's work and getting paid for it. But at the moment, we've got in this state teachers probably being underpaid, nurses who are stressed, who have been working, let's be honest, their guts out over the last few years, who are being underpaid, policemen who haven't got the powers they need, who are probably being underpaid. When those sort of workers, when people on our front line are seeing people holding a stop-go sign and these stories coming through being paid over $200,000 a year, I think every single Victorian would acknowledge that it's probably time that we give a fair go to our frontline workers. And when we see those things happening in conjunction with the reports that we've seen today, like I said, I just don't think it passes the pub test, as well as the broader problem of the cost blowouts and the financial mismanagement.
You get paid $70,000 a year as a nurse working overtime, and you get $200,000 a year for holding a sign, Sam. Tell me where that's not craziness.
No, I don't think there'd be a single person watching this program tonight, Steve, that would disagree with you. Like I said, it's time to give the frontline workers in this state a fair go.
Sam Groth, always a pleasure to catch up. Thank you very much, mate.
Thanks, Steve.